Let me preface this with, we are now VMware by Broadcom. That'll come up in a minute. So today what we're going to talk about is cloud for a rainy day, and I'm just going to challenge a few of your preconceived ideas about where you run your AI models, and it's going to follow on a lot from what T-Rob talked about. So we're going to talk about just who am I? AI is great, we know that, that's why we're in this room. We also want to talk about the headwinds. There's going to be a big chunk about that, about the headwinds. I'm very pragmatic, I work with real customers in the real world, and it's about that path to production that T-Rob talked about, and what are the challenges that you face, that you may face, if not now, in the future, and planning for the future as well. We have a solution, of course we do. I wouldn't be up here if I didn't have a solution and said it's all doom and gloom, so we're going to talk about that. This is not a sales pitch. I'm not going to talk in detail about you need to do it our way, ours is the only way. I'm very pragmatic about this. I am not in sales, just to be clear. Finally, I'll talk about some of the challenges, that some of the advantages of the solution that we talk about. But first of all, to me, I'll let you drain the slide, but basically I work for VMware. I have a history in banking. I did AI way back when before it was trendy in 1991, and you can do the maths on that. Edinburgh University did a bit of an AI degree there. Not much hasn't changed in many ways, from Prolog that I did back there to MATLAB to all of the stuff we're doing now. The basic ideas are roughly the same, and a lot of the risks, etc., are the same. The main issue is technology has allowed more to happen, which we'll talk about. Bit of a giggle. What I do is it's VMware by Broadcom. This is a disclaimer. Apologies if some of the formatting is a bit wrong. We're in the process of changing PowerPoint formatting, so that's a bit fun. Just for a giggle, I put it through ChatGPT in the spirit of this. Don't read it all, but I'm a tech wizard mixed with a rock star. I'll take that. I'm a tech therapist. My father would agree, because he phones up all the time getting things, trying to get me to fix. And I'm a cloud whisperer. So I talk about when it is appropriate to use a cloud, when it is not appropriate to use a cloud. What is a cloud anyway? We'll come on to that. So AI is great. We know this. Look at the statistics. We all know it's really, really good. Key thing at the bottom right is financial services. That is the industry that I tend to represent. I tend to talk to mostly financial services people just because of my background. So that's what we're going to focus on here. A lot of the things we're going to talk about are completely the same for other industries as well, with a slightly different take around the regulatory side. Finance is just dipping its toes in. So this data is, I would argue, it's a little bit wrong because it talks specifically about large language models. AI, depending on your definition, has been going on for a very, very long time. Whether you think about it as, I don't know, a yield to maturity curve when you're doing bond math or something like that. Technically, a yield to maturity curve is some form of artificial intelligence and some of the assumption it makes. T-Rob mentioned about quants back in the day. I worked with quants on the trade floor. They were doing this long, long time ago, whether it be support vector machines or whatever. It's been going on for a while. But the key point of this is finance are doing things. AI influenced revenue. This is specifically for financial services. As you can see on the left here, it's about existing products, sale of new products, but also on the right-hand side, this is the thing that your favorite airline does to increase the prices of the flights that you desperately want to book. This is how it's used in the real world. So AI, fundamentally, I appreciate there are some people that do it for really, really good reasons. They're philanthropic and they're wanting to create new cancer drugs, etc. I work in a pragmatic real world within financial services. They need to derive shareholder value because they're not charities. With the greatest respect, that's what they need to do. And to a greater or lesser extent, I would anticipate a lot of you are in the same position. Some of the problems highlighted by T-Rob again. 79% C cost savings, that's great. 67% C increase in revenue, that's brilliant. Oh, but only 31% have AI in production. This is all from a survey from NVIDIA about 12, 18 months ago, so it's pretty good. Majority are sitting in the experimenting and testing phase. Lots of people going, click, try this, awesome, but can it get to production? No, why not? So on the right-hand side, MLOps, step to the fore. This is what we need. So pragmatically, you can have lots of people playing in your labs, having great fun with all the CV enhancing skills, dare I say it, but you need to derive business value for this. You need to be pragmatic and get it to production. This is how we help. Headwinds, this is the big one. So although I came from an AI background, I'm fundamentally an infrastructure person. I'm the person you don't really want to talk to because I'm going to say, sorry, you can't do it usually, assuming you're all data scientists. On one side of the equation, you've got the data scientists yourselves. You want to click fast, get things to production, get things being used, have fun. You want us out of your way. On the other side, the IT operations team, whether it be on premises, off premises, in the cloud, doesn't matter. Fundamentally, they have to mitigate against things like shadow IT. Back in the days when cloud was just in its infancy, how many people were aware of credit cards that got run up with a huge AWS bill because of a buy button? That's shadow IT. That caused huge amounts of problem in many industries, not least of which some of the industries that went a little bit to the wall because they spent too much on hip and trendy cloud and they couldn't back it up. So there are two sides of the equation, and we need to tackle both. I appreciate that a lot of you are consumers of the infrastructure, but I want to give you an insight into our world slightly, what happens in the real world, and how we can work together, and I can become invisible to you. That's my goal, so that you can just consume as much as you want, when you want, with the guardrails. Privacy, it's quite important. This is where I argue quite strongly that everybody has a privacy policy, but what does that mean? When you put it into, pick your favorite cloud, it doesn't matter where, you're safe, secure, and everything, they've got all their policies. However, it's not just about technical silver bullets. To T-Rob's point again, it's about people and process. And if you get people and process, things go wrong. Sorry, if you get people and process wrong, things go wrong. So there are threats everywhere. This is a real story. You can look up the links. Samsung, we all know this. This is quite often talked about, where Samsung went into ChatGPT, put too much there. Oops, their IP is in the world. It's gone. It's lost. It's now in the public domain. The other thing is, minor detail, a few years back, Italy decided to ban ChatGPT. It was a bit of a response. Others followed, and then they rescinded this. So it's all okay. But you can see where people are coming from in this space. Who knows what these are? Hands up if you do know. Good answer. How many have them? Awesome. You're going to like this bit then. These are pictures. These are pictures that were leaked onto the internet. These are pictures because what was happening is Roomba, it's all public, they were doing testing of AI models for image recognition. They passed it on to a third party. Third-party processes and procedures weren't quite as stringent as they promised they would be. Top left one is obviously not shown because it's someone sitting on a toilet. Bit embarrassing. So it's a bit of a joke here, but my point is that privacy is out there. If this is your financial data, if this is your health data, all these sorts of things, we need to worry about privacy because it has a real material impact, not just seeing people, your mum sitting on the toilet, rather embarrassingly on a Reddit site. The consequences of this are financial. It's not just for fun. So the key one here is Amazon. Look at that. That's huge. That's their fines to date. Now, this is actually 18 months old as well. So there are financial implications if you do not do privacy correctly. So more regulations, because we like regulations. In financial services, there used to be the mantra, there are 4 C's, comply, et cetera, but fundamentally, Wall Street versus European, this is the old joke. The Wall Street banker C is a bit of a guide, and then they'll just, the final C is they'll contravene and buy the risk. So that is a valid response for financial services, where we say, hey, it's risky, but if it goes wrong, we'll just pay the fine. That is no longer happening. When you see a lot of the EU regulations that are coming out, such as these, more and more, and this includes the AI Act and various other things, they have teeth. So that is to say, in some cases, for example, DORA and various other things coming out, in some geographies, you can be put into jail if you contravene these acts. This is not just a, yeah, we'll buy the risk conversation. And this is fascinating when I have conversations with, shall we say, some of our global banks who might have a slightly different Wall Street sort of attitude to this. You can't do it. So, DORA. Hands up if you have not heard of DORA. Oh, right. This is going to be interesting then. That talks about lots of banks. But if you go look down here in the bottom right, ICT third-party providers. That's you, assuming you work in technology. Deloitte came out 2 years ago. You should all be working on this, running between 2022 and H2 of 2024. That means you're all finished with your DORA preparations, yeah? Some important definitions from DORA. And it's not just the childhood character that my daughter loves. Apologies, I have to do it. I'm not talking about Estrella, though. Service provider. What is a service provider? Most of you will fit into this bit, software, in some way, shape, or form. They are covered by this act because you're a third-party service provider. I want to talk about concentration risk, because the concentration risk talks about cloud computing services. Basically, it's putting all your eggs in one basket. There was a paper from the UK Government Treasury Department, I think it was 18 months ago, where they talked specifically about, and they named these things. So if AWS goes down tomorrow, 60 to 70% of retail banking in the UK will stop. At this point, it becomes a critical national infrastructure. At this point, the regulators start going, we've sorted Lehman's, and Lehman's can never happen again. RBS, it's fine, we've put on all this regulation. Oh, so Amazon dies and everything dies. That's a bit of an issue. So what they're doing is, although on one hand it's a really good business reason to not put all your eggs in one basket because there's business risk associated, this is now transcending business risk and becoming critical national infrastructure risk. That's why it's important. There are various other reasons that are driving the operational resilience agenda. Geopolitical challenges, wars could break out, etc. Data volumes, that's a huge big deal. You know, AI is nothing without data. Customer expectations. Everybody wants, you know, you're not a proper CEO if you're not doing any AI, so, you know, you want to have a brand even if you're not doing it. Public cloud security. There is a security aspect about public cloud. And from I don't want to, you know, say I'm anti-cloud, because I'm not. I'm very pro-cloud. I'm very pro-choice, however. You should be able to put things in the right place at the right time for the right reasons. And we, on the infrastructure side, should be able to protect you from doing crazy, silly things and then getting my IT director fined or put in jail. That's the goal here. So, important definitions. Apologies, there's a proportionality bit that's grayed out here. Thank you, Broadcom. Basically, it's down to proportionality. I'm not trying to say that everybody is going to be hit by exactly the same regulation here. This will obviously apply to the HSBCs, the Goldmans of the world, etc., far, far more than some small two-bit company, you know, mom and pop shop doing something in rural America. That doesn't count. So, for example, American financial services, DORA doesn't apply to them unless they operate within the EMEA space. But if in any way you operate in the EMEA space, DORA applies to you. So this is just about being pragmatic. This is not a dictate from the DORA, the EU saying thou shalt. It's a proportionality. Yeah, more regulations. ESG. So some people, especially certain, and I don't want to get into politics, but there are certain sides of the fence that say ESG is a bit woke. Who cares about the climate? It's going to be fine. But one, I passionately believe in the whole climate aspect, and AI is one of the worst things for this. I could quote lots of statistics here, but to be honest, I don't know the up-to-date ones. But fundamentally, when you're doing lots of cool stuff with LLMs or anything like that, you don't get this for free. There is a cost associated to that. And I don't just mean a dollar cost for electricity, I mean a carbon cost. And yes, there are various offsetting things, let's plant a few trees. That doesn't really help. What you want is you want net zero. These are the rules that are coming into play, especially within the EU. Now, why does that matter to you? If you don't particularly use that much, or, you know, let's put it another way. If you have two people doing the same business, and I'm wanting to, so a bank, for example, let's say RBS, no, let's not name names. Let's two big banks. One, they're both roughly the same in terms of what they provide to you, but as a business, one has a better ESG score. You will go with the one with the better ESG score because there's something called Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3, and Scope 3 is a roll-up that means that your provider score impacts your score. So even though I'm not in the data center business because I'm a concert promoter or something, if, however, I use a particular bank that has a poor ESG score, that affects my ESG score. So that's why it's important to all of us. But also, the S also equals dollars. So everybody talks about, oh, let's save carbon, save the world. No, for those that don't agree with the whole ESG agenda, it equals dollars, it equals euros. So the more carbon you save, the less money you spend on electricity, power, cooling, etc. So that focuses the mind as well. And the big thing is, it's about efficiency. So if there were a kind of a middle name or a nickname for VMware, it would be efficiency. We are seeking to make you the most efficient possible. So, challenges for enterprises. We've talked about choice because of concentration risk. You want to be able to put your data wherever you think it should go, and the Domino platform helps greatly with that. We will help some more. We'll come on to that. Compliance, we've talked about that a lot because that's one of the main headwinds, pragmatically, to getting all these lovely lab things into the real world. I want to touch one more thing on compliance. We've all heard of GDPR, yeah? So let's just say I train a model and it happens to have my personal data. It's not public, but I'm a bank and I've trained my model on my financial data. That's great. So that's in there. It's being used as, I don't know, a customer bot or something like that. And there are huge rules and regulations in place to stop you getting at that data. That's okay. However, GDPR contains a clause saying the right to be forgotten. How do I get the right to be forgotten on a model that I trained a year ago? I don't know what data it was on, because I didn't use Domino Data Labs. See what I did? So if you don't have that system of record in there, you haven't a clue what's going on. So how do you comply with GDPR? These are questions that are genuinely unanswered in a lot of banks, because a lot of banks have done a lot of training of various models. They don't know what the data is. So I said, if you're not already, I would suggest you use Domino to get this system of records so that you can go back and say, Paul needs to be forgotten. Paul's data impacts these data sets, which impact these models. Therefore, I will have to retrain those models with a changed data set to comply with GDPR. Be careful about that. We're going to talk now about cost and performance, because those are key tenets of our solution here. So, not pulling punches, these are the dark sides of the public cloud. It's not a panacea where you just click buy, buy, buy. On one side, it's not designed for failure. If you go cloud native, it means that it's going to fail. And if it fails, Microsoft offer 3 nines, Amazon offer 3 nines, etc. You can sometimes get 4 nines in these crazy cloud providers. What happens if it goes wrong, though? Really sorry. What we'll do is we'll give you some cloud credits. Awesome, thanks. That's not really an SLA. You want, financial implications. No cloud provider will do that. So if you want financial recompense, you need to bring it in-house. That's my attestation there. So it's designed for failure. If you're running models in the cloud, let's just say I get a node and I run 10 models, and it fails after 2 hours, but it's a 3-hour model. You've lost 2 hours worth of data. I would attest that the private cloud solution, we have better ways of doing that. Not only that, but when you're in the public cloud, let's just say I spin up a node or whatever, and I run 10 models. One model takes 3 days, the other are finished within 2 hours. That means that I'm taking up a whole node. You've not got the granularity of control. So from a cost perspective, you then have to pay for that whole node. So you don't have the granularity there. There are ways around it, but that's what happens in the real world. Assumed sovereignty. This is to do with, data locality, where it sits, why it sits where it is. It doesn't just affect the EU. It's, for example, Canadian citizens. Their data cannot be taken out of Canadian sovereign soil. You have to comply with those things. So if I'm doing anti-money laundering stuff or sanction busting stuff, and if I'm training data on it, I can't let that data outside the geographies. So there are these constraints that you come to. Lack of visibility and control. People will argue this, but I would argue that you don't necessarily. You're handing over the keys of who's running the infrastructure. So you don't really know what's going under the covers, and that includes cost. There are third parties that do it, but you have to get to a third party. No controls. This is basically what I'm saying is you as users can click buy, buy, buy. At which point it then becomes a bit of a shadow IT in the cloud, but for GPUs, which suddenly ramps up the bills considerably. The opposite, I would argue quite strongly, is better for on-premises. Purpose-built, highly available infrastructure. We've kind of been doing for 20-odd years. We know what we're doing. Most of you run on VMware without realizing it, and things don't go wrong because they don't go wrong, and we fix it before they go wrong. So that we are invisible in that sense, which is great for you because you don't have painful conversations with your business because things went wrong, but it's bad for us because we don't shout about it enough. But we fix things already, so we want to do that going forwards. Security and data sovereignty, this comes down to choice. This comes down to the fact that whereas T-Rob is talking about the deployment models saying, I will put guardrails around and I will say, these models can only be deployed to this geography. What I can do is I can start saying, these models can only be deployed to this geography, but this whole infrastructure I can then lift, shift, and move from cloud provider A to cloud provider B to on-premises to off-premises. We provide that flexibility completely transparently to you. You don't care. My job is to get out of your way, so you're just clicking deploy on models. Policy compliance. Policy, you've obviously got the policy engine from the higher level, but what about that policy engine about Canadian data not going out? What about the various other policies of NIST compliance? What about is it encrypted in flight? Is it encrypted at rest? We deal with that. We're the unsung heroes behind the scenes that do this for you, especially on premises. And we have far, far more control and built-in visibility into that. The visibility and automated controls, I'll touch on that because I want to drill into it a little bit, but we give various things like carbon dashboards. I'm not saying you should consume those, but on the infrastructure side, your teammates and colleagues that provide you a service, they will be able to give you access to that. So, what we have, VMware has produced something recently. It's American, it's not 5.6, it's 6.5, but we'll gloss over that. We've got something called Private AI. Private AI, I'm not going to drill into this in detail, but we've partnered with NVIDIA and various other people. And at the bottom, you've got choice of LLMs. It's faster time to value. It's bare metal performance. Performance is good. Virtualization is not an overhead, as we'll come on to. It's actually very, very good. Not going to drill into this in detail, but what I will say is it provides, VCF, VMware Cloud Foundation is at the heart of it. This is a sales pitch. So modern infrastructure, cloud experience, developers, private AI, that's where you fit. Secure and resilient, we protect you while you don't know you're being protected. It's about a cloud consumption model. This is it. It's not very exciting, it's a slide. But fundamentally, private AI services sit on the top. So we are this infrastructure, this omnipresent infrastructure, whether it be on premises, whether it be off premises, we want you to consume from a VCF-based cloud anywhere. So private cloud, we call it. We don't care about the location. Cloud is a consumption model. Cloud is not a place. So I can give you private cloud sat on top of AWS. It's called VMC on AWS. Sat on top of Google, GCVE, Google Compute VMware Service, et cetera, et cetera. All the cloud providers have it, and that includes local small cloud providers that might specialize in AI, might specialize in, defense, might specialize in PCI compliance stuff. So there are lots available. We provide that infrastructure across all of it. As I say on the right-hand side, partner and public cloud on premises. Right, we also have a very big ecosystem. I'm not going to go into every one here, but I do want to flash that one up there. These are on our keynote slides where we present at Vegas and various other places, and fundamentally we do a lot of work with Domino. So quite literally, you're in flashing lights. At the bottom, Cloud Foundation, various bits built on top of it. We work with all of these people. That's all. So we have a jointly validated solution. We actually presented this out quite a while ago, actually, and it's got quite good traction. There are bits and pieces in the middle. This is our bit. On the top, you've got Domino. So Domino sits atop of the VMware Cloud Foundation setup. What's important down here is two things. You've got SmartNICs, DPUs, and GPUs. Why do you care about DPUs? You shouldn't, it's infrastructure. You care because DPUs sit on network cards, they're little ARM chips that sit in network cards, and they allow you to do two things. First of all, they allow you to offload all of the security functions. So any of the network introspection, the security bits and pieces that the compliance people require you to do, we offload it. It doesn't impact your CPU usage. Not only that, it speeds things up. So if you're doing models that are talking a lot to each other, that'll do it. On the GPU side, we all know and love GPUs, if you can get hold of them. Just as a slight aside, I would also attest that, I know LLMs are actually, it's the hip and trendy thing, it's a new cloud in many ways. But pragmatically, most AI today is done without GPUs. We work very, very well in all of this without GPUs. We don't need GPUs to do this. It's all about the fairness. It's all about getting things and being most efficient on the hardware, making the best use of the hardware available to you at any point in time. But let's drill into the GPUs, though. So on the GPUs, what we do and why we would argue that it's a really good idea to use something involving us and how we can help you is it's to do with the granularity of controls. LLMs are one thing. I think the technical term is kick the bejesus out of the CPU and the DPU all at one time. So that's not necessarily a granularity argument, that's a process and control argument. But when you're running smaller, short-lived models and you're doing lots of them at the same time, what we do is we really, really make best use of the GPUs underneath. So you spent all this money and had to sell your granny or whatever to get hold of a GPU from, pick your favorite GPU provider, but it's usually NVIDIA. You want to get most bang for your buck out of that. If they're doing nothing, you're losing money. So the powers that be, especially infrastructure and the people that pay the bills, they want you to get the most use out of it and keep them running all the time. We help doing that because of the granularity that we allow you to salt and pepper it and schedule it. So what we do is, just step out the road, it gives you the higher utilization of the GPUs, lower costs, reduced workload fragmentation. And this is your bits in the middle. We also do graphics, we also do VDI, but that's what our core tenant. And we abstract away the hardware, so when you consume it, you don't care that you're consuming from a GPU somewhere. You just press go and you get a bit of the GPU. And when you're done, you let it go, and that GPU is shared within everybody. Bit of the monitoring capabilities, it allows not necessarily yourselves, but it gives you insight into the physical characteristics. This is replaced with this lovely chart here. This is really bad on the right-hand side because it's all red. The reason it's all red is because the memory utilization is really low. We want it to be green. The middle one is around sorry, that's the CPU, that's the compute of that. You've got the GPU temperature, you've got the GPU memory usage as well. So you get all of those things monitored and maintained by the infrastructure team. Do you care about this? Probably not, but at the same time, you want to be put in a position where you are getting the best service from your infrastructure team. This helps them do that. So pulling it all together, some of these benefits are for you, some of these benefits are for infrastructure. Efficiency, efficiency, efficiency. If you go away with one thing, think about efficiency. Efficiency also equals carbon, it also equals cost, it also reduces path to production. The better model performance, it gives you the better model performance at the right time, in the right place, in the right way. You get the democratized access to the hardware that people have sold their grannies for. So therefore, for a company, as a holistic view, they're getting the best use of their physical hardware. The regulatory compliance bit, back to the headwinds. You will not get out of the lab unless you comply with various regulations. Some of those regulations will be dictates in the very, very near future. Yeah, get ahead of the curve as the various people told you to start doing in 2022, so catch up quickly. Last side of it is it's extensible. So by extensible, I'm talking about you can add things in. You've got carbon dashboards. You can do this funny thing called disaster recovery. You can do high availability. Ransomware protection, something we've not really touched on, but we have a ransomware protection set up so that if your models are, I don't know, encrypted by some crazy ransomware person, we help you get back to a known state pre-ransomware. So we will protect you from that. So to wrap it all up, I am going to drain this slide. This integrated MLOps platform gives data scientists, it gives you what you want and need while keeping you safe, secure, and compliant. Therefore, you get better business outcomes. Just to be clear, I'm not saying you all have to go on premises versus off premises. The cloud has its place, however, know the limitations of it, and put a process, MLOps, round and work with your infrastructure teams to provide the best service to you and your business. That is it for today.
Thank you, Paul.